Great to know. All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Today's goal is to talk about AI, and specifically, we're going to try and make AI something that's a little less scary and intimidating and overwhelming. All right, we're going to see if we can show you how you can incrementally get value out of it, learn what a next step is that you can do in a small amount of time that will pay for itself within the first couple times you try it. And no matter what level you are, if you've never used AI before or you're using it every day with multiple tools, you'll learn what that next step is that you can do to get a little bit better. All right? So with that, let's dive in. My name is Will Molchin. I'm the founder of Ouroboros AI. I'll be posting the slides and a recording of the session. You can find out more details in the handouts. And I'd like to start, a lot of times people do acknowledgements at the end, but to make this talk possible, I need to understand how brokers are actually using AI today and what your needs are. So I went around calling people and asking them what they're doing with AI, and these courageous folk were willing to share their experiences with me. And that's what makes the difference between me coming up here and telling you what I think about AI and being able to actually learn, like, what are brokers actually doing and how does it get applied. So really appreciate all the people who participated in the information gathering part of this talk. Maximizing your return on investment for coming here today. So a couple things that you can do to get the most out of this session. You'll see already there is a green light lantern in the upper right-hand corner of my slides. That's going to change color. We'll talk more about that in a second, and how you can use it to kind of gauge how approachable different topics are and whether or not it's something you can experiment with and expect to get a good return on investment fast. Look for small incremental actions you can implement immediately. All right, yes, there are big disruptive things. You can totally go to a $30,000 app and try it out.
Can you adjust the microphone a little bit?
Yes. Hard to hear in the back. All right. Maybe it's a little bit better now? Less reverb.
Ask AI.
Hey, ChatGPT, how do I decrease the reverb on a mic from the mic? All right, I didn't get an answer for that one. All right, I'm going to keep going, but if someone sees the audio tech, hopefully they can flag them down and give us a hand. Yes, so incremental actions, little things that you can take that will pay for themselves quickly. You don't have to take giant flying leaps. Look for things that are similar to what you're already doing, that promise outcomes that are similar to the things you're already trying to accomplish, and try and embrace those. AI and new technology in general is hard. It can be scary. Lots of people, even the most tech-forward ones that are using dozens of tools, feel like they're behind and can't keep up with the rate of progress. Software engineers that spend their entire careers right now learning about AI tools worry that next month a new tool is going to come out for free from OpenAI that's going to obsolete everything they do. It's hard, and that's okay. So if you feel challenged, if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's perfectly normal. It's just a signal that what you're trying to do is hard. All right? Try examples and resources. In your handout, you'll find a couple different places you can check out, some practical things you can do to try and learn some of these lessons. Try those out when they're fresh in your mind. Don't wait a month, don't wait 2 months and say you'll do it later. On your plane ride back today, or if you get a chance for a break, or if you just get lost in the presentation somewhere, try some of these out. And the faster you try them out and try to integrate them into your workflow, the more likely you are to adopt them. And finally, ask questions. A critical part of learning is being open to new experiences and being willing to admit when you don't know things. I'll set special breaks throughout the presentation where you can ask questions. And afterwards, you can also flag me down in the halls or send me an email, and I'm happy to discuss any of the slide content that we're going over today and follow up with you. All right? So, I mentioned lanterns. So I've broken this down into 3 different difficulty levels. All right? So at the basic level, we're going to have green light. And that is if you have never used AI before, or if you've only used it in a very limited capacity, these are the things that are going to make it a fast return on investment. Even if they seem kind of scary or strange, if you put yourself out there and try them, I guarantee that within a few tries, you'll start to get a return on investment on the time it took for you to experiment. All right, that effort you put into learning something new, these are going to be the fastest payoff. They have the lowest barriers to entry. They'll often be free, $50 a month, low risk options. At the yellow tier, we're going to see things that require some prompting experience. There might be ways to do them that aren't as effective, or they might take some experience or practice to kind of get to the point where they give you the results you're looking for. but they're going to be generally approachable. There's a high chance of success that if you play with it a while, you'll be able to figure it out. And then the red zone, these are like the advanced topics. These are things we're going to touch on that are out on the horizon that you might be interested in. We probably won't go into step-by-step instructions for a lot of them. We will instead focus on like, hey, this is out there, some things to know about it. They also might have high barriers to entry, like they might have a high upfront cost or have significant complexity that you have to overcome to make them work. But they're still cool topics, and there are things that are on the horizon. You might be able to find tools coming out soon that will make them more accessible, so they're still interesting topics to cover. Also, this is broken down into a series of modules and topics on different ways to use the AI. So if you get lost somewhere in the red light zone, we're going to reset the difficulty at the end of each module, and you can come back to us, all right? When I ask for questions in particular, that's going to be your cue that we're resetting the difficulty. If we lost you, come back in, and it'll become like easier to understand, a little bit simpler again, all right? So you are here at the introduction. All right, now we might not get all the way through this roadmap, and that's okay. We have some ability to kind of adjust our pacing. We have a couple core things we want to talk about. Research applications, like if you have no experience at all, that's the most important thing I can talk to you about today. We'll talk about security, writing documents, and then eventually if we get to the expert content, we'll talk about income add back and recasting, and some other cool advanced applications that might have high barriers to entry, but are also very powerful and interesting tools. Okay. All right, so kind of as a little example here of how this lantern system works. So I'm going to go a little bit higher. This might lose a few of you here, but that's okay. We're going to talk a little bit about democratization of AI. And what that means is allowing people like you to access the tools, understand how they work, have low risk, like high value ways to learn about them and get practice with it. All right? It means trying to build your skill set up and understand a little bit about how the tools work, where the AI magic comes in, and be able to make informed decisions about what makes sense for you. So what that looks like. Democratization means incremental, affordable access. If someone is saying pay $30,000 and there's no monthly rate, $3,000 a year, try it or don't try it, no trial, pay for it up front, that's an example of not democratic, right? Something that is risky for you to have to learn. We're going to look for things that are incremental. You shouldn't have to take 150 hours of your day in order to learn how a new piece of technology works to apply it. That's not practical, right? So we're looking for things that you can try a couple minutes a day, an hour a day, something like that, that will start to build progress. Also, like instead of just saying something is AI powered, we're going to take a little bit of a look at like what that means, where the AI is involved, and importantly, how much trust we're placing in the AI and what we're trusting it to do. Because that makes a big difference in how reliable the outcomes are that we're going to be looking at. All right, and the third thing, right, this is an example of an advanced topic. What is Ouroboros AI? Ouroboros AI is rapid co-learning that happens when you tell the AI what you want, and it learns and gives you something better, but at the same time, you learn how to prompt for what you want more effectively. And then thirdly, like as we figure out what patterns of prompting give you the best results, we automate those. All right, so as we go through the presentation, I'll call out some opportunities where you can kind of improve your own understanding of how to prompt more effectively, even as you teach the AI how to do what you want. All right, so that is our first module. That's how it's going to go, all right? Light turns back to green, and we can start on our next topic here. So, in nearly every interview I conducted, the theme emerged that brokers don't want to be handed information you know how to find it. SIC codes and demographics are done by breakfast. By lunch, you're recasting financials, and before the day's done, you're calling clients about due diligence requests. You don't just gather facts. You use them to build trust, spot red flags, and move deals forward. However, all that work of doing the research takes time. And the thing that you don't want is for the deal to be held up while you're there trying to do solid research, right? Because the time that writing your SIM or talking to the client is held up on you is time that you couldn't be working on moving another deal forward. So we're going to look a little bit today about how we can speed up the research process while still making it something that's trustworthy and reliable, and try and save you some time. So, what success looks like. We're going to start off with the introductory level of getting just fast results on research that might be something that wouldn't naturally come up in a Google search. We will look at how to build context by integrating multiple searches together and maybe integrating some things that don't have an exact search result. And then at the far end, we'll talk about automated research where you can do targeted lead lists, which is a topic a lot of people have shown interest in, and other advanced multi-step research processes. All right? So, if you came in here today and you're the crowd that has said that you have little to no AI experience and you just want to get a place to get started, get an AI search engine of some kind. Most of the brokers I've talked to who try out multiple search engines say that they like Perplexity the best. It is almost identical to Googling. It works really well if you treat it like Google. And what it does is it will go out and read the web pages for you instead of you having to read them and come back to you with the answer. So for strengths, it's almost no learning curve. If you just start putting in what you put into Google into Perplexity, you'll immediately start getting results. It requires almost no habit change. And it will also give you nice audible sources. So if you have doubts about what it's telling you, you can go follow up and see where it came from, which is a core feature that not all of the AI tools currently provide. It also has a great mobile app. So if you're just looking for something to get started on, you can install it even at the conference here and try out a few questions. Highly recommend doing Perplexity or ChatGPT search if you have not tried either one of those yet. How does it work? So you might say something like, EBITDA multiplier for restaurants. That's not even a complete sentence. It doesn't matter. It's going to go out and find someone who wrote something about EBITDA multipliers for reference. In this case, it says that for privately held single unit or small chain restaurants, average multiple ranges from 2 to 3.5. All right, but you'll also see there's this little number right here, right? The 6. Also, I personally think this is kind of a wide range. I don't know how helpful that really is. But you'll see this little 6 here, right? And so what you can do is you can click on that, and it will tell you, like, hey, source number 6 came from Phoenix Strategy Group's website, and they wrote some article about how to value restaurants. And so you can go and look and evaluate, is this a trustworthy source? And does it match whatever the AI claimed was written there? All right? So that gives you power back to check whether or not the research you're providing is accurate, while still saving you the time of having to find all the websites in the first place. Pro mode. I use this personally. I have ChatGPT has replaced my search engine. If you guys look at your handouts, there's actually a link you can look at for a plugin for Chrome where you can install this. And it will make it so that way if you just type into your top bar there, whatever you're looking for, it will automatically use ChatGPT and search the results for you and then tell you what it found. Very cool because it requires absolutely no change. If you already use that as your search mechanism, just typing in the bar, it'll just pop up. You can set it up once, forget about it, and you'll already be learning how to use AI more effectively just by doing that. Really easy step. Also, if you want to set this up for Perplexity, there's a little bit more steps involved, but you can ask ChatGPT or Perplexity how to do it, and it'll give you instructions. So the real superpower here, moving into yellow zone, is the ability to ask follow-up questions. So at the first level, it just replaces Google. All right, you ask it a question, but a lot of times Google can give you direct answers right away. But the interesting thing starts happening in, like, all right, I asked for Tam and Sam for grocery stores in Ohio. And I'm like, wait, what if I just want Cleveland? I'm trying to figure out, like, what's a realistic description of the market for this particular client? And you can say, well, you know, maybe all the grocery stores in Ohio is an inaccurate representation of the market, right? This is an organic food store. That's kind of a narrower, more specific thing. And instead of having to start up an entire new search about, well, what's the organic grocery store market in Cleveland, Ohio, you can just ask, what if it specializes in organic food? It remembers the rest of the conversation you've had so far. It knows the research questions you've asked. It has them still available, and it will reuse those to redefine your market, which can be a huge time saver. So here's an example for powerful synthesis capabilities of something that isn't written in a single website somewhere. It shows its ability to take multiple data sources and put them together to give you useful results. So in this case, it says something like, hey, I looked up the population of Cleveland, I looked up the average grocery spend per person, and I multiplied them together to give you the estimate. All right, so now yes, you could do this individually, but the AI is smart enough to realize that it needs to pull multiple data sources together to answer your question, and we'll go and do it for you. And when I try and refine it to say, let's talk about just the organic ones, it will say, hey, I found some data someplace that says 7% of grocery sales are organic or specialty, and factors that in. And so you can iteratively kind of narrow down what a reasonable market looks like, question by question, and kind of work with it. You can even ask it for feedback, like, hey, do you think this is reasonable? Is that really a serviceable market that they have, or is it perhaps a little narrower, or maybe a little bit wider? And it will collaborate with you to try and find an answer. So, case study here. I got laugh. Okay, so someone at least understands. Laundromats. Apparently, people have some people, not all, have this impression that the way a laundromat company works is that you, as an owner, show up to the laundromat, you take the money out, and you stick it in your pocket, and you leave. I mean, it sounds great on paper. I don't know if that's how it actually works. But the people who end up selling or listing a laundromat will often end up joking. I went to an IBBA chapter meetup, and apparently multiple brokers were swapping stories about all the laundromat people they had that wanted to do this. And so it gives you an opportunity, though, right? You might list one laundromat and get a list of 70 people who want to buy one, right? Well, that's great, but I only had one laundromat to sell. How do I find more laundromats to sell? Because I have all these people who want to buy one. How do I find more to sell? So that is something we can do with our advanced research capabilities. So from collaborator to independent researcher, all right? So before we're looking at asking follow-up questions, we're still kind of babying the AI through the steps. We're telling it, I want you to think about this, now consider this, now consider this. In deep research mode, or in the O4 mini high, we can actually map out like multiple steps. So in this case, we do something like check Google Maps for laundromats. For each of those laundromats, check whether or not they're big enough to do what we want. Look up the registered owner in a government database or some other like public source. Check social media, check their LinkedIn, check Facebook. See if you can find contact information for the individual. If you can't find contact for the individual, then at least give me the company's public phone number or email. And then I'll put a CSV of the results, something that I can then like hand off and go through and call, however you want to manage your leads. And so what that looks like in practice, right? So you would have this deep research mode checked on your ChatGPT prompt. I think I can laser it even, all right? And you would say something like, I'm a business broker. This is important. You're setting the context. Who are you, and why are you asking the information? I want to generate a list of potential sellers. I specialize in Ohio laundromats. That might not be true, but we don't want to get distracted with other kinds of businesses. You can say, I want to be a certain revenue, and I'm looking for a CSV table, specify what output you want, and all the information that you would like it to contain. All right, and I put in too, please directly to the owner, so that way it doesn't just default to giving me the public business address. What does this look like? So if you actually run this query, I did this, we're going to see on the next slide what it looks like, all right? You will get something like, hey, to get started, can you please clarify some questions? All right, so when you do deep research, it will always ask you one round of questions to clarify. You can skip it, you can say, I'm not going to tell you any of that, and it won't ask you anything more. You can write a 10-page essay, it's still not going to ask you anymore. You get one round of follow-up questions, and if you really want to get the most out and start learning how to use it more effectively, the Ouroboros moment is to go back and learn, hey, I recognize that it's asking me for specific cities or regions, and it wants to know independent or franchise. So next time you ask a question looking for laundromats, all right, you want to add the information that it asked you for in your original prompt. And a lot of people will actually like save this prompt right into a file someplace, and they might ask it, give it to me for Cleveland, give it to me for Cincinnati. And each time you write down whatever questions it asks you and just keep adding it to the prompt that you're building. And eventually, your results will kind of peter out for like doing this, but the first couple iterations will dramatically improve the quality of your results. What does it look like? You get this nice table that comes out of it, all right? This is the actual like output that I got from the prompt. I did actually change the name and contact information here, but this is structurally still what it is, and those are the real business names. And so now, is this like, 1,000 list lead? No, but it costs almost nothing. It's 25 leads or 30 leads you didn't have before lunch. It's something that it only takes a few seconds to set up and ask the question. If you save the prompt, you can ask it for a different city each time and move around. Very, very powerful capability, all right? And it's not limited to just lead generation. I picked this one because it's relevant. You can ask all kinds of questions about the market, or anything that has multi-step like research, it can go out, look it up, and do that kind of flowcharty thing I showed before, where it will do multiple steps of research to give you your CSV. New feature dropped recently, it can now give PDF outputs. Yeah.
Which engine are you using to produce this?
So this is the output from ChatGPT deep research mode with the prompt I just showed.
Deep research.
ChatGPT deep research, yes.
This is a paid subscription, right? It's not a free version.
So I don't know if deep research is available in the free version. I think you need at least the pro version. All right, so it's like $20 a month to get the pro version. I personally use the Teams version, which is like $50 because it has a little bit extra security on it, but that's kind of the price range you're talking about. And so for $50 to get 50 leads, that's going to pay for itself pretty fast, right? Like, yeah.
You know how you said if you ask it to remember the prompt, it will, just before you were saying. But what's the difference between that and having doing it on deep research and having a GPT do it?
So
if you ask it specifically the area, it will remember the prompt for next time, correct?
No, so when you're asking it for the area, what you're doing is you're trying to... Yes, so the question is about ChatGPT remembering your previous responses and how that compares to deep research mode.
How deep research mode compares to when you make your own GPT.
How deep research mode compares to when you make your own GPT.
When you're asking it the same prompt, you're saying, find me the multiple of X, a restaurant in this area.
Okay.
Is that different doing it on deep research to having your own GPT do it?
So yes, the question is, when we went back here, we were looking at like individual questions. We asked follow-ups each time to kind of build a context. How is that different than when we have this flowchart thing that's going to do multiple steps at once? And so the biggest difference, all right, is that when you do it one by one, you're asking a single question to AI, and unless you're using the absolute newest model from any high, it's going to do one search, and it might check 10 pages on that one search result, but that's all it's going to use for its information, all right? It's going to say, give me grocery stores in Cleveland, wherever. Here it's going to maybe do like 2 or 3 like data sources, but then it's going to give you one output. When you do deep research, what it actually does is it's able to read the results of that page and whatever it thought was initially it should research, and then make more Google queries based on that. And that's the big difference. What deep research does over the basic research mode is basic research, you get one round. It says, I'm going to research these 5 things. It comes up with 5 Google searches, it does them, and then it's done. And it'll try and give you the best answer based on those, but that's it. Deep research looks at the results of those searches and then makes more searches based on them, which is why it's possible for it to do things like say, hey, after you find a location on Google Maps for the laundromat, check to see if it meets or not. Like, that's not something it can do if it doesn't already know what the business is. It can't go look up the registered owner until it has an idea about the business. It can't find their contact information until it knows the owner. And so that's what makes it powerful, and you don't have to baby it through all those steps. You can say up front, here's the process I want you to follow, let it rip, and it will kind of continuously give feedback to get there. Great questions. All right, so we talked about adding things to the question, and those are our results. A couple tools out there that are trying to help make this something that is a little bit less manual heavy. So Zoom Info and Even AI give me sticker shock personally. $10,000 to $15,000 a year, no monthly plans. The brokers that have used them and talked to me about it have said that it is very expensive, very powerful, but also requires a certain amount of expertise and a very specific target market in order to be effective. So if you know you are targeting laundromats or software engineers and that you're gunning for them and you have some amount of experience building like profiles with marketing tools to like build campaigns, then these tools can be useful. However, if you don't have that experience, or if you have a whole bunch of different industries you're trying to look for a service broadly, a little bit less effective, and maybe not worth the risk of it not paying off. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. A lower level, in terms of a little bit less powerful, but a lot more affordable, Apollo has something that's a little more traditional, where you can search for like business size and industry, but it'll have a AI search that you can say like, hey, find me people who are asking questions that sound like they're interested in selling their business or exiting. And so someone searches, how do I find the value of my business, right? They might be trying to, sell it. And so it will figure out that, that might be something that you're interested in. And it will actually give you like a feed that says someone Google searched that met your profile in the last day or so, something that sounds like they're interested in selling their business. Contact them now while the lead's still warm. So it's an interesting option, not quite as powerful as the other ones, but also much more affordable for experimentation. So just a quick recap, we talked about use perplexing ChatGPT for no excuse research. If you haven't tried an AI search at all, pick one of those two, try it out today, try it out the next time you would Google something. It pays off so fast. And consider replacing your default search engine with something that uses an AI in the background. We also talked about simplifying searches, not having to repeat yourself about everything you're searching for, looking and saying, hey, what about this, what about that, without repeating the entire question. And also looked at how to take multi-step research flows in the case of lead generation and get nice CSV outputs out of it. So next steps, I kind of went over already. If you haven't yet tried Perplexity, also, if you have not yet tried research with O4 Mini High, that is OpenAI's light research mode. Even with Teams, you only get 12 deep researches a month or something like that. There's a cap on it. But O4 Mini High is unlimited, and it can do a slightly weaker version of deep research with that, I'll go out, find the search, look at the search results, and then figure out if I need another search and can chain those together. So great option for a budget search option. And if you are having trouble getting this search to work, feel free to email me. I'm happy to help guide you through how to do the research. Yes?
What happens if I have a list of a couple hundred companies, and I have the name of the company's address, but I want who's the owner? Can I download a Excel spreadsheet and say I want the contact information for these companies?
Yeah, so the question is, if I have a list of potential leads, but all I have is their business name and maybe an owner name, I don't have any contact information, is there a way to use the research feature to kind of flesh out and find contact information? The answer is absolutely. Depending on how big your list is, you can actually upload the entire CSV or PDF of your partial leads of the business names in and explain to ChatGPT, here is what I want you to do. I want you to go find who the owner is and their contact information. You might have to break the list down into smaller pieces, feed it 50 at a time or something like that. It'll probably ask you things like, hey, do you have any idea what county these are registered in? What state is this in? What industry is it, right? It'll try and give some lead to help narrow the search down for best results, but it's absolutely something that I can support. All right, so is there any other questions before we go to the next section? I got time for one or two. Yes?
You mentioned about joining ChatGPT at pro level $50 per month, which would provide more security. Can you expound on that? Does that mean then any confidential information will not be available to the public? Is that what it means?
Yes, and that is actually our very next module is going to be all about security, so that's a perfect lead-in question. So indeed, as was just asked about whether or not the pro tier of ChatGPT gives you security, so it's not public information, right? If you don't specifically check otherwise, you can tell the AI, don't share this. And if it's training on your data, the first time someone asks for it, there's a chance that it will just provide it to them. And if you don't have some assurance from whoever your vendor is for the AI that they are not training on your data, you should assume that everything you're giving it can be shared with other users by default. And in the case of ChatGPT, to answer the question directly, even though we'll get there in a minute, the free tier of ChatGPT drains on your data. So if you're not paying for a subscription for ChatGPT, anything you search for, anything you provide to it, can be given to someone else who asks for it. That doesn't mean it always will. It might not happen the first time, but it's possible for it to share that information with someone else. And if you get the pay tier, even the pro tier is enough to stop that. And then what the team tier does is it gives you a guarantee that they will delete any data they have related to whatever you asked within 30 days. They get rid of it off their servers, which is what I meant by a little bit extra security. So, what is safe to share with AI vendors, right? We're going to talk a little bit. Security is an important topic. Confidentiality. So if you guys deal with some of the most sensitive documents like that people can talk about, financials, right? Tax returns, bank statements. There's a professional responsibility there to make sure that whatever you are holding is safe and not being leaked or distributed. And so we're going to talk about what is safe to share with the AI under what circumstances, and talk a little bit about vendor vetting in general. All right? So success looks like for this module that you will know how the AI can inadvertently expose client data through the model training we just talked about. And if you aren't sure whether or not an AI is safe, we'll talk about what you can do. We'll give you some quick rules of thumb to say like, hey, it's okay to share personal identifying information, some good trust indicators. And then at the end, we'll talk about some of the more aggressive, like search probing questions that you can ask if you're considering sharing tax or financial information with an AI vendor. All right? So, model training. One of the major ways that AI improves is by looking at what users give it, what responses they liked and didn't like. And that is just an inescapable fact of how the AI companies improve their products. But what that means is that once you say, the dog jumped over, I like the moon, the dog jumped over the moon, if someone else asks, what did the dog jump over, the AI will learn, well, last time someone talked to me about this, the answer was moon. And it will fill that in. And so in the same way, if someone asks the question, like, what was Tom's tax return, what was his total income in 2024, and AI knows, it will just tell them if it's something that it's aware of, all right? And so you can, if you try it yourself, it might not have learned every single person's, and it has some safeguards to try to mitigate this. But if it's training on your data, what that means is that it's learning what good responses are and will try to regurgitate the things that you tell it. So, some actual examples. So Samsung had a data lake via ChatGPT where they used some of their internal source code, and they realized a few weeks later, hey, ChatGPT is outputting code that's really suspiciously like our private source code. And hey, it's mentioning libraries and stuff that are specific to us. How does it know about those? Well, it's because it trained on it, and it learned that, that's how the company writes code. It recognizes the pattern, and it says, okay, I can copy this. Slack similarly had an issue where they trained the AI and allowed it to see private conversations. And so then if you asked it, hey, what did those two people talk about? It would tell you exactly what they talked about because it was trained on that and was trying to be helpful. All right? So this is a real risk. That ArcViz link right there will actually take you to a research paper that gives step-by-step instructions on how to get an AI model to give you answers that someone else gave it. It is like a reproducible phenomenon if the model has been trained on your data. So, how do we protect against this? You want to find something written in agreement somewhere on the vendor's website that says explicitly, we don't use your workspace data to train our models. All right? If you don't see this, assume that they are, but ChatGPT, the paid tiers, will have this, or Boros has this. I think the paid versions of Perplexity can get this as well. Make sure whatever platform you're using, especially if you're using some intermediate vendor, that they are not caching and using your data for model training. All right? It's often used as a way to offset costs too, right? If you use the cheaper model, it gets to train on your data, they offset the price, but that's not really what you guys are looking for. So what do brokers actually do to get around this? So one thing that people do, if they don't trust the source and they're apprehensive, they'll say, all right, let's go replace the person's name. We'll call them Mr. X, Mr. Y, client A. We'll go through and replace all the numbers with some other random numbers. However, this actually is really tedious, and there's a good chance of making mistakes. Lawyers will actually, and attorneys, law firms will actually have AI tools that will do this for them. But if you don't trust the AI in the first place, that doesn't quite work. However, it is a way, if you're just getting started and you're apprehensive and you really want to be safe, just don't give it information that it can give to anyone else. At the next tier, vendor security, right? What if I don't want to redact everything? So Equifax had a case where they had social security numbers, birth dates, and other sensitive records, but it was not encrypted at rest. You want to find something. So if you see in the corner how HTTPS here, and you'll sometimes see in your browser not secure. If you see not secure, don't give it anything that you don't want everyone to know about. All right? You want to ideally find a statement somewhere on the website that they will encrypt your data in transit and at rest. You want to be able to delete your data. This is called data disposal. It's a major thing to make sure that they don't keep it on their servers and get lost later. And ideally, you want multi-factor authentication. A lot of brokers find multi-factor authentication really annoying, so a lot of the companies make it optional, but it is a significant security measure to add some safety to your data. So there is a document called the GLBA that dictates what a financial service provider has to have in order to be considered securely protecting consumer data, specifically for financial documents. And it lists out like 17 different things that you have to check off in order to be verified as being safe for consumer data. A lot of those are really difficult for you as a broker to understand. I don't expect you all to be security experts. However, SOC 2 and ISO certifications make a great proxy for those services. If you see someone is SOC 2 certified, that is a strong trust signal that they have good processes to keep your data safe. However, it is expensive, and you'll find that a lot of small companies especially just don't pay for it because it's expensive, and it takes a lot of effort on their part to maintain the standard. So just some quick things I did research for you. Perplexity, ChatGPT, and Google all have SOC 2 certifications, all right? Whereas, like, if you're using, even I don't have SOC 2 yet, Deal Builder, Tupelo, these might be secure, they might have good processes, but it means they don't have a third party that can tell you that their processes are secure, all right? So then if you want to trust them with something that's extra sensitive, you're gonna have to do some more digging. You're gonna have to interview them, ask them some hard questions before you trust them with something that's really sensitive, all right? So if you want to actually dig into some of that, right, you have someone you really like, they sound like a great company, they offer you a valuable service, they don't have those certifications, what are some things you can ask them to help build some confidence that they are serious about security and will keep your data safe? All right, they should have, according to that same GLBA thing that says they're safeguarding your information, they should have a written information security plan. And it shows that they're thinking through how they make their decisions, they're documenting how they're addressing different security threats, and the idea is that an auditor could come in, read that document, and say, okay, here's how you're addressing various threats that can happen. Let me check if you're actually doing those. And if you are, great, you're secure. And it's really kind of like that clean. Like, you want them to be able to answer, you know, how often is it updated? It should be, an answer would be like, every time we add a new feature, we look for security vulnerabilities it could have, and we write about what we thought about in our written security plan. That's the kind of answer you're looking for. If they say, oh, we're just really secure, and so we don't really worry about it, we don't write anything down because we don't have a concern, that's not such a great answer, right? Similarly, incident response plan. Even secure vendors should have a incident response plan that says, if something did happen, you gave us the information, it got leaked, how would I be informed about it? You want someone that says, hey, within 48 hours of learning that something happened, I will figure out if your data is impacted, how it happened, and what corrective action is needed. All right, so that's what ChatGPT's policy is, by the way. They say that within 48 hours, they will let you know if something happened to your, like, high-tier secure data. So I actually went through all those 17 criteria I mentioned earlier on the GLBA, and ChatGPT meets 16 of them very cleanly, and the one is kind of implied but not directly stated was that they will give timely notification to regulators in particular. So there's a requirement in there that says that if you're holding tax information and you have a leak that impacts more than 500 people, you must alert the FTC that the breach occurred. And there's nothing in their official documentation that I could find that says they will do that. But they have all the other 16 requirements, and it's kind of implied that they will do this through some of their other policies and certifications, but not explicitly stated. So for me personally, I look at that and go, okay, wow, they're close. They're close enough that I'm willing to trust them. But you have to make that decision on your own. So compare with outsourcing, like, you might not be responsible for financial accuracy, but you are responsible for confidentiality. So even if it's not ChatGPT, whoever you might be outsourcing, whatever tool or service you're looking at to provide the recasting efforts, perhaps, like, you want to be checking, are they SOC 2 certified? Do they have some kind of independent check, some consultants that come in and tell them how to be more secure? Do they have a written security plan? Will they let you know if there's a breach? These are important questions to establish before you give them clients' financial information. So recapping here, check if a model is training on your data before you give it something sensitive. You can use simple redaction anonymization if you're worried about it and don't trust them. Look for encryption and data disposal before you give them someone's name or address or any kind of like sensitive information like that. And then ideally look for SOC 2 or ISO as a shorthand for being particularly secure for sensitive documents. And then at the advanced tier, like you can ask your vendors about security-related documentation to kind of gauge their commitment. They should be able to explain to you like how they respond to various threats. And the OpenAI ChatGPT passes the requirements for handling some sensitive financial documents, with the exception of that one that was kind of implied. So I know I covered a lot of material there on the security. I want to pause for a moment. If I lost you, you can kind of reset and start coming back in again. Are there any questions on the security module I can answer now while we're getting everyone back again?
You mentioned that there's certain enhancements to security when you upgrade to the Teams plan.
Yes.
Is that retroactive for the data, or is it from the time you sign up?
So that would be defined in their data processing addendum. It's a specific document that talks about that. And I don't know the answer off the top of my head. So I do know that they say that for legal reasons, they will retain everything for 30 days. So if the law enforcement asks them like, hey, make sure that it's, did this person ask ChatGPT how to build a bomb or something, they want to be able to investigate, they'll keep it and then they'll delete it at the end of those 30 days.
Are you familiar with DeepSeek, and how does it compare with ChatGPT and Perplexity? And is something you can recommend?
So the question is about DeepSeek, all right? So DeepSeek is a model from China that is well known for being faster and cheaper than ChatGPT with competitive results. And one of the interesting things about it is that while DeepSeek has a China-based service that you can go and pay for, they also allow you to set up your own server. And so what I would say about it is if you are running DeepSeek on your own private company infrastructure, then it is really safe because you can even make it so it can't access the internet if you want to. You can do all kinds of things, but it costs something like $20,000 to set up your own private instance of DeepSeek. And if you're not doing that and you're using the website, then you've got to go through all those same questions of like, are they secure? Are they getting those third-party audits? In their case, you might have some questions about foreign influences that you have to decide, and that is DeepSeek versus ChatGPT and Perplexity. All right. Are we good on questions for security? All right. Communication hubs, all right? So brokers are communication hubs. In every deal, you are juggling market data, buyer profiles, seller docs, and legal fine print. You are not just salespeople. You are translator, curators, and guides, all right? The clients rely on you to help them navigate the sales process and translate for them, in a sense, how all these documents fit together and what the impact is on them personally. And that is a huge responsibility. So a story I liked was that there was a company that was very customer focused, and they established themselves by making great relationships with other clients, but they were very personal, very small, right? They're a people person. They're like, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure that you get your services. But the buyer was a large corporate entity that was using a strategy of just buying up smaller businesses to get their customers. And so when the offer letter came in, it was this 50-page document filled with legal jargon. And the seller balked and was ready to walk away. It had the price, it had all the terms they wanted, except that they couldn't understand what it said, and they were convinced that the buyer was trying to screw them somehow, that somewhere buried in all this text they couldn't understand was a trap that was going to make them lose all their money or something bad would happen, and that the reason why it was so hard to read was like a deliberate or malicious attempt to fool them. And it's relatable, understandable, right? We talked about earlier, the technology is even overwhelming when you don't understand it. Dense legal documents can absolutely fit that description. And so in this particular case, though, the broker was able to use ChatGPT to create a friendly client version of the contract that explained what the terms were, and they still ended up using an attorney to check everything, but whereas originally the client said, attorneys are expensive. I don't want to talk to them. Yeah, right? It's like, okay, the attorney can answer your questions, but if you don't want to talk to them, that's hard. He was able to say, okay, here's a nice consolidated list of concerns that you can then take to the attorney. And so instead of having to call him back and forth 5 times or fight with the client to talk to the attorney more, you can present the attorney with a clear set of things to go over. They've had an hour-long meeting, resolved everything, and we're able to close the deal. So in this section, we're going to talk a little bit about how to do document analysis and translation, how we can use ChatGPT to make translations of documents more accessible for our clients. So, checking on the time real quick here. All right, we are behind. That's tough. All right, so I'm going to move a little bit briskly through here. So in short, we're going to try and summarize emails and documents, focus summaries on the things that we care about, and then figure out how to scale all those workflows to larger documents. All right, so to get started with, summarizing short documents and emails, all right? The most basic version of this is that you copy an email or document, maybe Control-C, in ChatGPT you type, hey, what does this say? Paste your actual prompt in, and hit enter. And it will say, hey, here's this inscrutable document. They're requesting the adjusted P&L and timeline. All right, now the basic version, you might not actually ask pointed questions about what you're looking for. You just give it a big, hey, what does this say? And follow up from there. However, we'll find that this doesn't always work out. So as a famous example, Apple Intelligence, right, would say, BBC News report says, hey, someone won the semifinal. And then the summary is they won the world championship. These things are obviously not quite the same. So how can we fix this? So one of the things we find is that it matters which AI model you use. So if you're using 51% of Apple Intelligence responses, 34 of Gemini, 27 of Copilot, 17 Perplexity, 15% of ChatGPT contained massive research errors that were flagged by the people that were doing this study. So those are some pretty big numbers. So the model you use definitely makes a big impact on how trustworthy the results are. We also see that missing context is listed as a major source of problems that can cause the AI to give inaccurate results. So let's just go over that here. So if you just give it the context, got this late, can you follow up on this? What does this say? Bill got something late and is asking Tyler to follow up on it. Well, that's not really helpful, right? That doesn't really tell us anything new. It doesn't really save us any time or effort. But there's a thing you can do. When you go to draft your response, there's these little triple dots you can click on, and it will give you this like text-based version of your conversation history. You can then use that with Control-A to select the entire conversation history, and if you pump that into the model, it will say, hey, a potential lead emailed us on January 30th, asking if we're available for a quick chat to learn about AI. Please follow up on this, all right? So it's a lot more useful if you can give it the entire conversation history. Now, I have heard of some tools that are trying to make this a little automated and a little bit more smooth, but they haven't quite reached maturity yet in the fact that I haven't heard brokers telling me they're using them. But the concept's there. If you give it the conversation history, it will give you substantially better results when you're asking it for summaries. The other thing that can happen is that the AI doesn't understand what you're interested in. And so this is an opportunity to focus the results on specific things that you care about, like what actions must I take? What deadlines are there? What are the key deal terms? All right, and the more focused you make these questions, the better the AI responses will be. So you can do this to say things like, hey, explain this clause at a 6th grade reading level. Specifying a reading level is a great way to get the AI to kind of dumb things down and make it more accessible. It's a really popular strategy. And you can also give it instructions to keep the dollar amount, timeline, and who pays what. And then it will give you a nice client-friendly clause that will break things down in a way they can actually understand. However, when you go to scale this to large documents, you'll often run into issues where it will say, like, this offering outlines purchase terms, timelines, and contingencies. It looks standard. You're like, well, that's great. I knew that's what it contained. That doesn't tell me like any of the specifics, right? It's too vague. It's too general. That's a sign that you're giving it too much information at once to process. And so one of the ways to solve that is you focus on one section at a time. You might feed it like chapters 1 through 5 and ask one of the questions. Then you give it sections 6 through 10 and ask the next question. And then you take those things and you put them together, and that's your translation of the document. It's a very manual process. You can do things like edit your previous response, change the section number to get through. But that can be really slow and tedious. Or Borite, that's one of my products, allows you to kind of get rid of the having to copy and paste so much. You can just write out, like, I want to get the translation of the first section, the second section, and the third section, and it will then like put those into a single document for you very cleanly, so you don't have to do quite so much manual like trimming around the edges, which can be nice. And because this has been so popular and powerful, I'm actually looking to make it even simpler with a translate for client option as one of my upcoming features. Not quite there yet, but I'm working on it. So advanced use cases for time reasons, I'm going to go through even faster. You can say some things that people have tried to say, hey, what's negotiable in this deal? And just highlight terms that they think could be like discussed or might have some wiggle room on them. Also comparing different versions of proposals, you can say like, hey, they gave me a counter offer. What's changed since the previous offer? And some people like to be able to do that to just give the client like, hey, new offer came in. What's different about it? What changed? And you can get a nice little summary. So recapping, you can save a lot of time and effort parsing legal documents and large email chains. Even the best models will fail some portion of the time. And if you're specific about what you're asking for and use specific education levels, you can get a lot better results. All right, so as brokers, relationships are your currency. Clients trust you because of your judgment, empathy, and clear communication. The way you communicate shapes every deal, every negotiation, and every client relationship. But there is often a fear of sounding fake when you use AI for communication tools. There is a concern, a very valid one, that the client will think that if you let AI write their emails, they'll feel disrespected. And I have this imaginary like client that people have in their head that's like, raw, they used AI. I can tell they used AI in this email. They must not respect me. Is this actually a real thing? So we're going to talk a little bit about how AI authorship detectors work and their limitations, and then what you can do to be able to communicate authentically, convey the information you want in a way that's clean and professional, and doesn't make the client feel like you are not putting the effort in to be real with them and provide useful information. So can your clients tell if you're using AI? So there have been millions of dollars invested in AI detection, particularly in academia. And the tools will use patterns like word frequency, complexity. They'll count the number of times you use the. They'll count the, they'll look for phrases like, let's dive in. And they'll be like, okay, like these are things that AI like to say a lot. So like, if you use the a lot, maybe it's AI written. All right. Do that actually work? Notoriously unreliable. You might as well flip a coin most of the time. The real thing these can detect, though, is if you put zero effort into the prompt. You say, write me a 10,000 blog post about how to sell your business. And you give it no more information. And you don't refine it whatsoever. And you publish it. It might flag that at a slightly higher rate. All right? So that if your client's trying to use some kind of tool to detect AI writing, it's not happening. Can humans detect it? Can they read it and determine that it was written by an AI? So there have been a lot of studies that people cannot reliably differentiate well-refined, and that's a key word here, AI from human writing. People detect AI writing because it has generic, fluffy language, or it breaks from personal or cultural writing conventions. So, if you don't normally use emojis, and you send the client an email, and after every paragraph is an emoji, they might raise their eyebrow. If you normally send plain text emails, and it's common for your industry to just send normal, like plain text, no bold or italics, and you send a message that every paragraph has bold in it and some italics, it might look a little strange. But in other places, like engineering, that's totally normal. Like people use Markdown back and forth, so it depends on kind of like the social and cultural cues of whoever you're talking to, what they expect. And if you break from those, that they can detect. Interestingly, studies show that readers often prefer, if you give them a blind choice, and you say, here's two documents, One was written by a lawyer. One is the AI explanation of the same thing. The AI version is actually often preferred and more likely to be acted upon than the human version, which is kind of interesting. All right, so people can't detect the AI writing if you're refining it, writing it effectively, and will oftentimes prefer it over just a human writing it out. Also, a lot of brokers like the writing as being better than hours of their best work at a fraction of the time. Using it to like refine your writing and help you write can be a huge time saver without compromising the quality of what you're writing. So bottom line, it's undetectable and effective as long as you are putting the effort in to make sure that it sounds like you and that it conveys what you want. You need to have a vision for what you're trying to communicate, and if you do that and you put the effort in to give the feedback, it will come out well. So how do we do this? Quick version, right? Low level green here. You say, hey, I need help refining this draft. That's all it takes. It's generally best to have some kind of separator, whether it's a triple hyphen, quote marks, triple backticks, that separates the instructions from the content that you're trying to edit. The longer your context gets, the more editing you do, the more important it is to separate out what you're asking the AI to do and what data you're asking it to do it on. And what it'll come back with is something like, sure, I'll write you that message like you asked, and it'll give you the message, and it'll say, hey, I wrote the message. And then what you'll have to do is go in and like cut out the top and bottom. That can be a little tedious after a while, especially if you're working on large documents. You have to like keep doing it back and forth, having to keep like trimming off like the little top and bottom part of like explaining what you're trying to write and then telling you that it wrote it. So Ouroboros kind of like cuts that fluff out. It will give you like just the section content itself. And it also has some nice little buttons here for common features that brokers use, whether that's uploading information like some financial summary, or if you want to edit it directly or add some refining. It just gives you a little bit of automation on the process. You don't have to spend quite so much time on the prompt engineering, copying and pasting things over. Feedback, though, is essential, right? Whatever process you use, whether you're using Ouroboros or doing it manually, the thing that will make it sound less robotic is to put in both what you like and don't like about the writing. And if you say, I don't like using pronouns, use their name directly, that's great. If you like to be direct and have it be very clear and don't like pleasantries, tell it that. And the more of that kind of feedback that you give it, even positive stuff, will dramatically improve the quality of your results. So a little Ouroboros moment here. How do you refine it? So I mentioned there's a little refine button here that you can do. You give it feedback, and then we'll immediately like refine the section for you. Beware, though, of quick refine tools. There's a lot of popular tools out there for text messages and emails. And when I say popular, I mean that the companies force it upon you. I talked to one broker, it's like, I've never used an AI tool, but I use Office 365 because the company pays for it. And they have a little thing in there that refines my emails. And so I use it a little bit, but I don't always like the result. Maybe you do like your result, but if you find that the refinements you're getting don't sound like you, or you don't like what they say, they don't sound authentic, they're not effective, generally because you don't have context control, there's not enough information about what you're trying to write, and if you're not guiding it with feedback, you have a high chance of getting that kind of generic, fluffy language we're trying to avoid. So, to get the best results, people use interviews to try to get this context in there, right? You can say, write an email, I mentioned earlier, giving context about who you are, who your audience is, what kind of tone you want to have in the message, are all very important things to kind of get that message across faster with fewer like churning of like giving it feedback and keep asking it to refine it. The more information you provide up front, the less iterations it takes to get what you're looking for. And if you give it too much information at once, it can sometimes get lost. A lot of times you need to add a little bit of structure to the information or for the AI to internalize it. And so the way you do that generally is to say, hey, interview me to gather details and then draft based on my answers. And it'll ask you, what's the key objective? What are you trying to ask about? And that kind of gives it the scaffolding it needs to make sense of a large amount of input data that you're going to try and write with. In the case of Ouroboros here, if you click on this little interview button when you're trying to do something, it will actually like tell you like, hey, section 1 was what to expect. It's introductory overview. It'll kind of explain what it knows about the section. And then it'll give you some specific questions you can answer that it's looking for that it doesn't understand on how to improve its output. This is another case where if you get used to looking at what kinds of questions it asks and start putting that in your initial response, you'll start getting better and better responses. And one of the cool things about this process is you can leverage your personal voice. So a lot of times we want to be professional. We have certain things we don't want to say to, like about the client or directly to them. We kind of try to find ways to be professional. But you can be very candid with the AI. You can say like, your stubbornness is jeopardizing the deal, or you push for urgency and you hurried everyone up and now you want to wait, and trying to convey how that is an obstacle in the process or causing tension in the relationship with a potential buyer. And if you explain that candidly to ChatGPT, it will help you find a way to express what you're trying to say in a professional way that still sounds like you, but is much milder in tone, which can be really powerful. Also, it's a lot of people, if you like, when you're done writing, you can ask it like, hey, what did you learn about my personal writing style? Right? Ask it like, you know, what would you wish you had known at the beginning of this to be able to get me my results faster? And if you do that a couple times, it will like give you useful like, hey, you really like a direct and friendly style, or like maybe you're very professional and formal. Whatever the answer is, if you take that and then start sticking it in when you start writing your next thing at the top, you'll eventually get your answer faster and faster. All right, and also when you're doing this, like the AI can generally only handle 1 to 3 paragraphs at a time effectively, like if you're trying to actually like refine the content. So if you have a document that's like 20 pages long and you're not using any special tools, you'll have to break it down to small little pieces to work on each one individually. A lot of the time what this looks like, people break it down to like having a Word document on half the screen, ChatGPT on the other, and they just start copy pasting back and forth until they get through the whole document, which is very tedious, but it does get you the results. Some other things you can do, some brokers will actually hire someone to build custom workflows. So they'll say like, here's my last like 10 sims. Can you please make me a program that only writes sims, but writes them like me? And we'll use your past sims as like a data set to kind of learn your writing style. People who have used that say it costs about $500 a sim after it's been built. So it can be kind of expensive, but especially if you tend to do the same kind of industry, like in this case, people are doing it all over like very specific. I do software engineers, and that's what I do. It can be a good option. Or Borite tries to do this by giving you some automatic scaling. I mentioned you can normally only do like 3 paragraphs at a time. Or Borite does a lot of cool stuff in the background, so you can upload the entire document in, and you just work on the individual sections. So you don't have to worry about breaking into small pieces anymore. It can be really nice. So, recapping, most people want clear, effective communication. You can give feedback on AI outputs to personalize them, and leverage Borite for scalable, authentic writing. If you use interviews, it can get more context, and being candid with the AI can make the process easier. Any questions? All right, clearly I went too fast. I kind of overwhelmed some people. That's okay. Come on.
So back to the security.
Yeah.
So I think you're talking about a situation, you might upload tax returns or something, so it can do a summary of the financials maybe for 3 years.
Yep.
And so the question is for security, you just simply tell it, do not share this information.
It will not be effective if you tell it, do not share this information. No, you need to make sure there are actual safeguards and the vendor is appropriate, that's not trading on your data, they have some kind of SOC 2 certification, something like that.
So, but something like a ChatGPT that does have those things, you listed them.
Yes.
For that engine, you could simply say, do not share the data.
So that will actually, you don't even have to say it. It will simply not share the data. If it's been told not to train the model on your data, it will just not do it. You could even tell it to train the model on your data, it wouldn't do it.
Okay.
All right?
So the answer is yes, you can tell it not to share.
Yes, you can tell it not to share, and it will keep your data safe if you're using the paid tiers of ChatGPT. So we are at time, but I can still take some questions here. And if people want to stick around, I did have a cool thing about tax recasting that I can talk about. I had a question over here, though.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as I've been using it, now it's starting to use a lot of my tools, like I use the database and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to get it a little more original. It's now sharing my whole world into the data. I don't know if I can explain it, but I wish it would reach out, but it's sharing all the stuff that I put in the past. And I want it to get more unique. I want it to think out beyond what I'm thinking about. Yeah, I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying. Like I use PeerComps as a database. So now I say, give me some ideas, and it is shadowing all the stuff I've said before. It's not reaching out, thinking out beyond where I've already on the data. You can see the numbers. Does it make any sense?
I'm working on it. So the question is about if you have a database or something that has information about you and what you're working on, like can the AI go beyond what it's been told to give you a more comprehensive answer?
It seems to be reflecting a whole lot of my whole world more and more in a way that's a good thing. I'm getting that bubble filter like you do for Google. And it's like, I want to just think outside the box
yes.
a little bit more. And I'm like,
The AI likes to validate you, and it likes to use things that it remembers about you, and that can cause you to get in a little bubble where it stops going outside the box. And a lot of times you have to explicitly ask it, like, please, like, think outside the box on this. Another thing you can do is you can actually disable your memories temporarily. There's like a temporary mode you can use where it will not use memories of your previous conversations. And so that can be a chance to use like a little sterile step outside the bubble if you want to get an outside perspective on something.
in some ways it's good, but some ways I want to do like,
Well, yeah, right. Be real with you.
So
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so we have some people that want to stick around for the tax recasting real quick, so I want to talk about that. So this last April tax season, right, I wanted to get in for the tax stimulus check from back in like 21 that came out, but you had to file your taxes. And so you have to go through and taxify business or personal, right? Well, as it turns out, this is something the AI can do really well if you set it up right. And what setting it up right means is we want it to be auditable, right? We want to be able to say how we made our decisions and have a human being check over them. We want to make sure that the numbers are correct, the AI isn't adding things incorrectly, and we want to have some kind of confidence about how good our answers are. So at the basic level here, right, if we're just looking at is this business or personal, it does a great job of saying, hey, it can output an Excel sheet that says, here is where I got the information from, this is the financial statement, here's the date it happened, all this stuff, here's the reasoning. So in my case, I put in a statement that says, I own a VR arcade. So things that might not normally be considered business expenses, like Steam games or something like that, in my case, they actually are business expenses. And so it can learn, based on that, what makes sense for the business, whether or not it's personal or a business expense. And so it also will give this reasoning and a little confidence score so that when you're done, you can go through and say, like, hey, I want to check out all the high quantity amounts, how you classified them. I want to look at like the confidence score of like maybe things that you were not very confident about and investigate them, right? And so this actually I've already written and works really nicely. You can actually give it a zip of like entire year's worth of PDFs of financial statements. It will go through all of them, give you one giant Excel spreadsheet at the end that gives you the analysis. And so that's really cool. And I was thinking, well, hey, if it can go through and classify whether or not expenses are business or personal based on a description of what the business is, how about recasting? Is this something that we can do? And my answer is absolutely. So the idea behind this would be that you have some kind of zip or archive that has all the bank statements or maybe tax returns in it, all right? And some kind of interview or client notes. Maybe you talk to them about their business and like how they spent their money. Maybe you just talk to them and take some notes down of like, oh, they're a small company, they've got like 10 people in it, whatever. And you feed that into the AI, and it can go through and say for each one, like, hey, this is an insurance like payment. That's often an example of pass-through income. You might be able to add that back, right? And it can actually highlight things and say, hey, maybe you should investigate this. You know, this is often a case where something can be recasted. It might not be for this particular one, but it's worth investigating. And so this is something where I had initially talked to people about whether or not this is something they're interested in. And while there was a lot of strong opinions, it was a lot on like, it's not possible. It's not secure, it wouldn't be accurate numerically. But if we choose the strategies we've talked about here, right, using ChatGPT, going through those 17 steps of the security program, if we say you're not adding numbers, you're not just trying to find and list out a list of ones that are personal expenses, we're creating an auditable trail complete with reasoning and confidence scores on what we decided were add backs or recastable and what wasn't. Would this be valuable? And so that's a question I have. I mentioned earlier a little bit about democratizing AI. This as a product doesn't exist yet. It takes a little bit more sophistication than what you can manually do right now with copy and pasting at ChatGPT. But I think it's an interesting application that it absolutely can be made if there's enough interest. All right, so it takes something like 75 people to say that this is something they would at least try if it was built in order to justify building it. So if it is something that you are interested in, send me an email and let me know. You can scan the QR code. There's a blue bucket in the back you can drop your business card in. And if you would like to have a recasting app like that, where you can go through and have it label for you whether or not something is recastable or add back, and that's some reasoning about it, let me know. And if I get enough people sign up for it, I'll try to make it happen. Yeah, question?
Would it work with QuickBooks?
Yeah, so in principle, it should be able to work with any kind of structured information that is your financials. Like it might need something specific for QuickBooks, but absolutely that can be done. Yeah.
Will ChatGPT recognize handwriting in a document along with typed information?
Yes, so the question is, can ChatGPT recognize handwriting? It depends on how good the handwriting is, a little bit. But yes, that's absolutely something it can do. It's uploading an image. It can be a little bit of an extra step, like you might have to like identify, like, hey, this PDF doesn't contain raw text, it contains something that someone wrote down, but that's absolutely something that can be done.
And so, are you training it though to calculate seller's discretionary earnings from a financial statement?
So the idea would be, yeah, basically to come up with the things that you guys actually are already doing when you determine what's add back, what's recastable, and say, look for these types of things and combine that with a description of the business. So you might still have to give it some guidance that says, like I mentioned, this is a VR arcade. That's going to change like how way you view the expenses. If it's a car, if they sell cars, right, that's going to change the way you view some of those expenses. But yes, I'd be trained and be able to do that.
I teach the 210 course, okay, the recasting class.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that for certain expenses, and as an experienced business broker, you know which expense categories are the ones that are most likely to contain things that can be added back to the bottom line. And so I think you would need a trained person who does that, and they'd be able to point it out. But ultimately, the ChatGPT would have to respond and say, I see that you have travel and entertainment here.
Yeah, you may.
Was this being used? What was the nature of this expense? You'd have to ask questions back to
Yes,
the person using it.
I definitely agree that the way to make this effective and actually like meaningful would be that it has to ask questions and say like, hey, this is something that could be, like you said, travel expenses. Some portion of this might be something that can be rolled back in. You need to follow up and tell me, and then possibly, ideally, I think when you answer that, it will then apply it to like the rest of the questions, right? So if it finds the first couple expenses, like, hey, there's a lot of travel here, investigate that, you give the answer, and it will redo the math based on what answer you gave it. Yeah.
Can I download an audio file from a phone call or a Zoom file and have it transcribe it?
So the question is about transcriptions. And so right now, I don't believe that you can easily upload a recording directly to ChatGPT to get a transcript, but there are tools out there that can do that. If you ask ChatGPT how to do it, I'm sure it can give you a tool to create the transcription.
Check out read.ai. It'll go into your Zoom, it'll record the entire thing. It's a lot less aggressive about its recording. Like it doesn't scare sellers off. And it actually creates an entire knowledge base based on your emails, your transcript, and everything, and it's searchable. And like I did it the other day. What multiple did I tell this guy? And it's like, you said this.
Read.ai.
But it's not.
What are your thoughts on O1 Pro versus just regular 4.0?
So personally, I use 4.0 for things that are less important to me, and that I just want a quick answer to. I generally use 4.5 for anything that I'm seriously interested in, like getting a really emotionally intelligent response on. And then if I want image generation, or if I want something that's actually like serious, heavy reasoning, I use 04 Mini High. So that's kind of my breakdown of which models to use. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you were talking about the different models. Is there like information based, or could I just ask AI which models would be best for which to kind of get a better idea?
Yeah, you can ask AI about it, but I'd make sure you use search mode and not training. So there's like two different things. It has its training on what the models do, but if you give it search mode, it'll actually look up the documentation on what OpenAI says each model is for, which will be a lot more accurate than what it's trained on.
How long will AI be, I don't know, I go to AI now and ask them, of course I ask Google because Google will sell me and direct me and market me and do all the other garbage. Do you think AI will remain pure or relatively pure database of
source for knowledge?
A lot of that depends on consumers like you. I talked a little bit at the beginning about democratizing AI, and part of that is the idea that you guys have a vote in which AI tools you choose to invest in and develop. And so if the money goes to the apps that are doing what you're describing and they're doing ads and building them in, those are the ones that will get popular and grow. And if you give your money to the ones that are keeping your data safe and aren't throwing ads in your face, then those are the ones that will grow.
I'm not using Google for a lot of stuff these days.
That's fair.
You know,
Yep.
it's changing.
All right. Any other questions?
Be good, man.
All right. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I love talking about this stuff. So anything about the presentation or AI, just come let me know.
Total touchdown, man.
Oh, thank you. Glad to hear it.